Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Product Manager. Today we're a little, a little different format. Today we have some fun Windows community operator things to go through, and I'm going to introduce the host of characters I have here in a second. But some very sad news happened in the cloud native community over the weekend. The former general director, president, I forget his exact title, Dan Cohn, he was leading up the efforts for COVID-19 response from Linux Foundation. He passed away over the weekend after some complications with colon cancer. So to Dan's family and his kids, we are very sorry for your loss. Our condolences go out to you on behalf of the cloud native community and Red Hat. We are very sorry, and we're here to let you know if you need us, we are here. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you need anything at all. With that, I'd like to introduce our bevy of guests today: Anand, Aravind, and Gabriel. I said that in the order that it was just in my screen. I'm not sure who is speaking first, but please feel free to, let's start with Anand, since you're on my top left. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us what you do here at Red Hat. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everybody. My name is Anand, Product Manager with Red Hat. I work very closely with Gabe and Arvind, driving the Windows community, Windows operator to our customers. Over to you, Gabe.
Yeah, my name is Gabriel Markley. I'm a senior manager in the Openshiftorg department here at Red Hat, and I am the manager of the Windows containers team. Arvind?
Hi, I'm Aravind. I'm the team lead for Windows containers in the Openshiftorg, and I also lead the architectural work there. Back to you, Anand.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate y'all being here today. So, Windows Community Operator. Talk to me about it. We announced it last week, right? Like to a little bit of fanfare, right? Like this is a big deal for Kubernetes in general.
Yeah, it is, Chris. And if you remember, I think it was sometime back in July when we, did a demo of the Windows operator, the Windows Ansible playbook. Sorry, and we showed you how you could bootstrap a Windows node into an OpenShift cluster. Now, since then, Arvind, Gabe, and the rest of the engineering team have done an awesome job in taking that playbook that was built and transitioning that to an operator-based model. And the operator-based model, lends itself a lot of good things over the playbook model, and I'll talk about a lot of those things. Mm-hmm. But what has essentially happened is over those last few months, since we did the last Windows demo, is we've built out the operator, and we have, like everything with Red Hat, we've open sourced a community version of the operator for customers to kick their tires with and start, giving us feedback as to how they would like to see the operator improved, so on and so forth. And yeah, like you said, for the Windows community who want to get onto containers, for the Kubernetes community that want to bring their Windows workloads, this is, a big deal, right? And, we've had, regular, requests from numerous customers over the years. Windows Server enjoys a huge, presence in the data center operating system market. Applications like ASP.NET, VB.NET are, still, very popular in a lot of communities, and we really want to help those communities, accelerate their adoption, of containers and bring, some of those Windows Server applications to public cloud. And we believe this operator will, serve as a essential bridge, from Windows applications running on-prem to, containerized applications, running in the public cloud. And yeah. So we announced a developer preview of this sometime in April during the Red Hat Virtual Summit, and that was, like I said, based on a Ansible playbook, and the architecture was around letting you run Windows nodes in an OpenShift cluster alongside regular RHEL and RHEL CoreOS containers, with OpenShift orchestrating all the building blocks and serving as the universal control plane for a hybrid cluster comprising of Windows and Linux nodes.
Mm-hmm. And like the goal here, I think, is to be ubiquitous, right? Like,
yes,
be everywhere, for lack of a better term.
That is right. And today we are, pleased to announce the first community release of the Windows Machine Config Operator that will let you run Windows Server workloads on OpenShift 4.6 To begin with, we are taking a cloud-first approach, and this operator will be available on AWS and Azure with support for more platforms. Coming in the future, specifically things like vSphere and bare metal. We hope to get the next coming months. And Chris, as you might appreciate, vSphere is a very critical platform for OpenShift customers. So again, we're working very hard to make sure that happens pretty soon.
Absolutely, right? Like I think vSphere is one of the largest install bases we have, so making it a priority is our priority. But oftentimes, it's easier to kind of spin things out on the cloud providers than get into the guts of VMware, because sometimes we have to like work with them together. So I'm curious how that's been going. Just the whole process like is fascinating to me from stem to stern, right? Like Windows and Linux containers living in harmony, cats and dogs, singing together kind of thing, right? Like if you would have told me this 20 years ago, I would have said it's never going to happen, right? Like, seriously.
Yeah, and this is really enabled because we have a very tight engineering collaboration with Microsoft. So I called it out that this is a solution that will eventually be jointly supported by Red Hat and Microsoft. And once this gets onto GA and it gets onto the marketplace, customers can call Red Hat. And if there is an issue with Windows or Microsoft, we call Microsoft up, we fix it for you, and then it's back to you, right? So I want to call out a very tight partnership with Microsoft in this process, and they have been awesome partners in helping us get this delivered to customers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I hear there's a demo.
You want to get to it?
No, Anand, you tell me, man.
Yeah, so Gabe, I'm gonna pass the ball to you and show us the most awesome demo of Windows containers.
All right, here we go. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
All right. So this is a OpenShift container platform cluster that's been set up with OVN hybrid enabled. It is the minimum requirements is a 4.6 cluster with this functionality enabled. Once this functionality is enabled, the ability to bring the operator in is as simple as going to the operator hub and typing in Windows. And you will find the Windows Community Operator. I've currently already installed this on the system, but as you can see, we highlight out specifically what the prerequisites are and some of the more detailed information on how to do the initial setup. One of the key usages is that the operator creates its own generic cloud private key to be able to SSH into the Windows nodes and do its configuration of them. This information is here. It's also in the blog that I think was posted in chat, and it's all linked from the Windows machine config operator GitHub space as well. We give examples of machine sets. So we are using machine sets for both AWS, Azure, and our future platforms to roll and deploy new machines. What we can do is we can go into a workload. Actually, let's go down to compute and let's look at a machine set. I've enabled a machine set here and have already enabled 2 Windows machines as part of this machine set. This is a very similar YAML set that you would find for other machine sets. It highlights out a few specific things that are called out easily in the documentation, but in essence, we're pointing to our Windows image that needs to have containers and Docker enabled on it. Both Azure and AWS provide these, and so those machine sets are part of the examples as far as those are concerned. But
cool.
You can see once working with a machine set, though, say for instance you wanted 3 nodes instead of 2, we can actually do this, and we will see that we start provisioning another 3rd Windows working node.
Oh, snap.
So as this is
sweet.
Yeah, this is the part that is a little slow here, so I'm going to kind of diverge in the demo and then come back.
Oh, that's fine. It's a cooking show. We can treat it like that.
Yeah, okay. So exactly. So this part will cook, and as it cooks, what is happening in the back end is our operator, which Windows machine config operator, is actually, it's running on the Linux-based nodes, and it is actually looking for those Windows machines to come up. As they come up, it will reach in and do configuration on those devices as they become configured. Now, because of the initial startup time and configuration of some of the Windows nodes, it does take a little bit of time. So we will let that bake as it goes on. But as you can see, initial consistency gave us our current 2 Windows Worker nodes that we can work off of right now.
Nice.
For a small demo, I used a work deployment. I created its own namespace for it, which was the Windows workload. And this is just a very simple PowerShell-based web URL. So it returns HTML back based upon connecting to it. As you can see, currently we have 1 pod that's up and running. But say, for instance, you want to go from 1 to, say, 6. We can scale up to 6. As these get deployed out, we will see that they then get deployed onto the 2 existing Windows nodes that are currently ready for scheduling and deployment, and they will come up in their time as well. So we've got 3 of them now, and now we have 6.
Dang. That's like just as fast as Linux performance. I mean, obviously, once it's online, yes. That's awesome.
So those all come up, and if we want to switch over to more of the developer's perspective on this, we can see that we've created a Windows web service that points to this, and I've got a load balancer here that I can go to, and I can now reach my web service that is running on those 6 pods on the Windows
Very nice.
servers.
That's awesome. So can you have, there is a question in chat, and Anand, you kind of answered it. Can you have Windows and Linux workloads in the same project? I'm assuming yes, because they're just pods at that point.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And then bare metal support coming hopefully first half of 2021. Obviously, the next question would be, you know, what is kind of the racking stack, like vSphere first, bare metal first, both at the same time? I guess what's the priority list there?
Yeah, I can talk through some of this. So, like I said, you know, initially we are going to GA with a cloud first approach, which means the customers want to try this on AWS, Azure. You know, will get their hands dirty, you know, first, followed by vSphere. vSphere, again, you know, like we spoke, you know, of our install base, that's probably the most, you know, dominant platform on which, you know, customers try OpenShift. And the other angle is, you know, vSphere also enjoys a huge, you know, presence with Windows and Intel x86. I think I read some statistics that about 80 or 85% of all x86 servers are virtualized, right?
That seems about right, to be honest with you. I mean, it seems mind-blowing, but yeah, I would suspect most of them are nowadays.
Right. So given, you know, it enjoys such a dominant, you know, presence in that market as well. So that is the number 1, you know, platform of choice, you know, after VGA. Even, you know, by the time VGA, we're working very, you know, hard with Microsoft, with, you know, VMware, with Docker on some of these initiatives. And once vSphere is done, you know, we'll probably, you know, pick on, you know, bare metal. And
that's kind of a bear in and of itself, I feel like, as the definition of bare metal kind of feels like it's morphed over the years. Say what you want, like bare metal, virtualized bare metal on demand is the thing, right? Like, so correct. Bare metal question mark. When you say bare metal, what exactly do you mean? Like spinning up Windows hosts on, you know, actual like iron and then incorporating those into your node, or some quasi definition of that?
Yeah, we mean physical servers, right? That's not containerized, that's not virtualized, that's not, you know, running, let's say, an IBM Z or, you know, things like that. So just a physical, you know, Windows server, right? That's what we mean by bare metal.
Awesome. So yeah, currently only support for Azure and AWS at the moment, but is there anything stopping people from like trying other cloud providers, maybe, if they really want to hack away at it?
I don't think there's anything stopping them from trying this on a different cloud, but I would say, you know, wait till, you know, we, you know, simplify and support, all these platforms, because there can be things where, let's say, logging driver is not supported on Windows on Google Cloud, or let's say a storage solution doesn't work on Alibaba Cloud, right? So there could be, you could run into some flavor of an untested path that might make the solution not that appealing to you. So I would say wait till we test and certify some of these things, and then you can go play around with this as much as you like.
Yeah, and the whole, I mean, you can go to try.openshift or openshift.com/try. Sorry, try.openshift.com also works. And you can kick the tires on these platforms, relatively quickly and easily, and kind of cheaply, I feel like, to an extent, right? Like if you really want to kick the tires on the Windows machine config operator right now, and thinking in the future, you could totally take a couple hours, go to openshift.com/try, spin up something in Azure or AWS, your cloud of choice, and see it happen, and see the magic, and see what your workloads kind of do running on those virtual nodes. And like, I would encourage folks to do that if they're looking at seriously considering doing this in the future, right? Like there is some testing that kind of needs to happen, like to get yourself familiar with it. But definitely don't take this as like concrete guidance as this is the exact same experience you're going to get in vSphere, because there'll be differences.
Correct. So one other thing I want to point out is, as you're spinning up the 4.6 cluster, there is a hard requirement on OVN hybrid. So the cluster needs to be set up with OVN hybrid for the solution to work.
Okay.
And so remember that as you're spinning up the cluster, set it up with OVN hybrid, and for instructions of doing that, we'll send you links to our docs and our blogs at the end of this Twitch session. But that needs to be in place before you can use the Windows machine config operator.
So this is awesome and groundbreaking and all kind of like happening all at once, right? Like what are some of the, what is the demand from customers? Like what are we seeing as far as like, this is use cases that they want to do, right? Like I get it. They have a lot of Windows install base and they want to utilize that, but what is the use case here, right? Like running .NET apps in OpenShift, running full-blown, IIS servers. I mean, give me some ideas here of what the use case is for, adding worker nodes of a Windows type to your cluster.
Yeah, we do get a lot of customers interested in the solution, specifically from healthcare and manufacturing, where there is a huge Windows presence.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you a couple of examples from the healthcare industry, right? They want to run backend Windows applications, backend web applications. So if there is a provider or a patient who's logging into a website, that's probably written in ASP.NET, and so they need a login page that's running on Windows containers, and that login page needs to authenticate with something like group managed service accounts in Windows for doing authentication and authorization of their account. So essentially, web applications, backend applications is what is often requested for by customers. IIS, ASP.NET, VB.NET. We don't hear that much of SQL. I haven't heard of customers who are wanting to run their backend SQL databases in Windows containers. That's probably a very an edge use case.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that would be a thing yet.
But yeah, so at this time, customers are really what should I say, very eager to lay their hands on any solution that will help them take them from a legacy Windows application running on-prem to a more modern application that's containerized and running in the public cloud. And they need that that essential bridge to go from A to B, right? And those flavor of applications, like I said, includes web applications, applications that need authentication with external GMSA, backend applications, bad jobs running on Windows, web server applications. So these are some of the combination of applications that we hear that they are highly interested in running.
Yeah, so there's a question in chat here, and I kind of responded to it. Will Red Hat share a comparison table between Windows containers and Linux containers in the future? And my response is kind of like they're all OCI compliant, so there isn't that big of a difference. But what you can actually do with Windows and where essentially there's a hard requirement on Docker right now, I'm assuming. So like sky's kind of the limit there, I feel like, right? Like if you can run it on Windows in your Docker hosts, like locally, it will probably run on your server okay, you know, assuming you've applied the right security practices and so forth, so on. You can almost just point your CI/CD pipeline over to the OCP cluster running those Windows hosts as opposed to the current host you're pointing at, right? So replicate that environment inside OpenShift, and you can kind of just kick the tires and light the fires right there, right? There's not much difference if I understand things correctly, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the real answer is shades of gray. So yeah, there is not much of a difference in the sense that, like you said, OpenShift with Windows is yet another deployment target for customers, and they can point their CI/CD pipelines. Once they build their app in Visual Studio Code, they can take it through any supply chain they want. Push it to any registry of their choice. Bring it down to an OpenShift cluster with Windows nodes, and run things. So from that sense, the supply chain, anatomy isn't really, too different from a Linux, supply chain, right?
Right.
But the thing is, the Linux supply chain is way more, advanced with so much of other contribution from other, vendors and other, startups and other players. And Windows containers is still catching up to a lot of those things, right? Be it in storage, be it in monitoring, be it in logging, be it in tracing, be it, let's say, supporting Windows containers in Knative or in service mesh, right?
Good point. Yeah.
These are things that just work so seamlessly on the Linux side. But for these kind of things to come on the Windows side, it is going to take time, right? And all of this is going to require work not just from Red Hat, but for the larger upstream community come collaborate and get some of these things out of the way. So yes. It is the journey, the containerization supply chain journey is similar, but the Linux ecosystem is way ahead of the Windows ecosystem.
It's almost like a flywheel, right? Like the Linux wheel is started and stopped, or not started and stopped, but it's started and going, and now the Windows wheel is started and going. And there will be progressions and logging, and that cloud native like landscape for Windows has to kind of spread its wings as well. Right? Like if you go to l.cncf.io right now, it's this huge smattering of all these tools that you can use for any various function. But I like to say, go to the Cloud Native Trail Map and look at that and say, okay, do these things work in your Windows environment, right? Like will Prometheus and all your alerting and everything logging wise still work with Windows hosts? And sometimes that answer is no. Right? Like you might have something that requires or is, proprietary to Windows environments that you're using currently. And, you might have to enable some kind of connector there or, to give you an idea, like I don't have any ideas around like Windows containers inside service meshes, right? Like I haven't even thought about that yet or the serverless side of it with Knative, right? Like I haven't even gone down that road that far, which kind of brings a good question that Matt asked in chat here. Is there something that is clearly not recommended at the moment to do with Windows containers, right? Like don't do this with Windows containers right now. It just won't work.
Yeah, I would say be very cautious if you're trying to run this on vSphere. There are a lot of gotchas, and Arvind and Gabe are working very hard with Microsoft, with VMware to get a lot of these issues fixed. So that is a work in progress, and that story will get better. And trust us when we say we will support and fully test the solution before we go GA. So I would say that is the path of, I would say, most interest, and a few gotchas or landmines along the way that we're trying to resolve. So I would say that is the thing that you got to be most cautious about. But every other thing, like setting up like networking into the Windows nodes, Windows nodes talking to Linux nodes, Windows nodes talking to other Windows nodes. So all kinds of ingress, egress, east to west, north south, those things should be working. So so go ahead and play with those kind of things. When it comes to new platform support like VMware or bare metal, I would say that's the path that's got a lot of uncertainties right now.
Right. Yeah. Like I said. Oh, go ahead, Gabe. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to hop in and say that you're also going to see from our team a consistent release into the community operator showing new functionality regularly. So we will be regularly updating it. My guess would be about once a month. with functionality that will be coming in the future to the GA version. So if you want an early insight and to really, kick the tires, so to speak, as it's coming down the road, that is definitely the place to do that.
Awesome. Where would be the best place to get updates on that? Blog, the repo?
Probably both.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I will repaste those for everybody. If they missed that earlier, go to our blog, openshift.com/blog, and that'll take you just subscribe to it. If you're an OpenShift user, just subscribe to that blog, right? Like there's no better blog for you to subscribe to than that one. And then the machine config operator GitHub repo, where you can watch for releases and just you can watch everything if you want, right? Like you can monitor the entire process.
Yeah.
GitHub makes being creepy in code very easy. You can watch all the ones and zeros change if you want. So there's a GitHub repo for everybody.
You'll also see the work that we're doing there in real time. So
yeah, like it's community first, right? Like it's the Windows community operator, right? Like the experience will change as we move towards GA, because obviously we're adding more platforms and more learnings and more bugs to be found and all that fun stuff. But the overarching experience can be followed right from that repo right there. So yeah, and obviously stay tuned on the blog, because that's just the best place to find out news about OpenShift in general. So yeah, I mean, we just announced this thing, last Monday, I feel like, last Tuesday or something. So what have you seen in the past week as far as like, didn't think about that, or something new that after the announcement of it, anything of interest come across your desk lately?
Before that, Chris, one other thing I want to point out in terms of staying in tune with updates on our site is there is a mailing list, OpenShift-Windows@redhat.com.
Oh, cool.
Feel free to subscribe to that mailing list. We will be sending you periodic, regular updates through the mailing list, new content, new videos, new updates to the community operator, and so on and so forth. So that's another channel where you can go get updates besides the blog and the GitHub marketplace.
Awesome. Thank you.
And yeah, back to your question in terms of what kind of interest we are receiving. I think it's, a lot of the things that we've talked about, right? Support for new platforms like, vSphere, Bare Metal, IBM Z, IBM P, believe it or not, hosted offerings. Like a lot of customers, came to us and said, hey, this is supported on Azure. Is this going to be supported on, Azure Red Hat OpenShift, right?
Yeah.
Azure Red Hat OpenShift, or ARO, is the acronym for it, is the hosted and the fully managed version of OpenShift on Azure. A lot of customers like it because it's, fully autonomous, version of OpenShift on Azure. And a lot of our hybrid cloud customers, really lap it up, right? And we've had a lot of customers who have come and asked us, hey, you're supporting this in Azure. Does it mean it'll work on, Azure Red Hat OpenShift, right? And that is a great question. And I think the answer is yes, but that's something that, again, we have not tested, we have not validated, we have not supported. So if you want to go ahead and, take it for a test drive, I'm cautiously optimistic that things could work, but, things may break as well. But again, that is, in terms of the hosted offerings next year, I think Azure Red Hat OpenShift is going to be, I would say, the most, if not the most topical hosted platform that we want to add support for.
Awesome. So what is the key reason to use the OVN CNI? If a customer chooses a third-party CNI, like ACI, is there anything they should consider? This is coming in from chat, so take that with a grain of salt. In the sense that, like, what are the network requirements for Windows boxes here? Like, why is there this requirement?
Yeah, I can touch on it and then, hand the ball to Arvind, who can, delve a little more layers deeper. So OVN hybrid was a requirement given to us from Microsoft, and that's why we have to, set up the cluster with that.
Okay.
Having said that, technically things should work with the Calico framework. That's, another option. But again, the option does not use Calico. There is a blog out there that shows how to set up a OpenShift cluster with Calico for Windows, and I can point you to that blog. There was even a recording by the Tigera guys on this topic. But again, that's not something we support through the operator. That's just another option if you want to kind of do it yourself.
Right.
But I'll hand it to Arvind to explain why OVN hybrid is, a hard prereq for the solution.
Yeah. So mainly what's happening behind the scenes is that not only are we using OVN hybrid, we're setting up this hybrid option for OVN Kubernetes itself, where part of the network is actually carved out for most of the Windows node and Windows pod communication. And that's, again, like Anand mentioned, is what our SDN team, when working with Microsoft, came up with. So the operator is sort of opinionated about that. It knows that if it's a OVN Kubernetes cluster with hybrid networking, it knows what to do on the Windows node. So our plan is to keep adding more and more networking, third-party networking support as and when customer demand asks for it. So, for example, like Anand was mentioning, Calico might be the next target, so that the operator can detect, oh, okay, I'm on a cluster that's using Calico, and this is what I need to configure on the Windows node to get it working with the Calico networking. So that's our view at this point.
And I think the biggest thing to consider is that like cloud native infrastructure in general is like picking from the things that work best for you. So yeah, whenever these hard requirements exist, it's usually because, right, like this is the happy path first, and then we add on as we go. And start bolting on other bits and pieces, because we do understand that people are like making decisions around their CNIs for various reasons, policy, security, whatever it may be. And adding more to that, I think, is very important here, because there will be these bespoke use cases of I want to use Calico and Windows and everything else that comes along with that. What other fun things are kind of like front of mind for development right now?
Yeah, I'll let Gabe, handle some of these things. But Gabe, maybe we speak about, the monitoring piece, since, Prometheus, was mentioned and saying.
Yeah, so that's one that we're really excited about. We're really hoping to pull it in for RGA, but at this point, it's not slated for that. But you should see it in the community operator shortly. What we're doing is we've run a Windows exporter service on the Windows machine to export metrics in the way that you'd be able to use with Prometheus and Grafana to draw your dashboards and see all of those within the actual cluster metrics themselves. So we're in the process of moving that forward. That's something that I'm really excited about. I'm also really excited about VMware support personally. So like that's one that we're pushing really hard on as well. So we should see some movement on that within the repository.
I mean, what kind of problems did you have with Prometheus, I guess? Just being curious in general, right? And a Prometheus user, right? Like what differences are there? I mean, obviously I know the differences between Windows and Linux, but from a Prometheus perspective, I mean, getting that exporter running, how hard was that?
There are some subtleties, okay. The way that Windows and Linux reports like the metrics, so to speak, is sometimes slightly off. What is a core on this version versus a thread on that version, so on and so forth.
Got it.
So we had to work through a lot of those. Networking too is a similar constraint. They're not apples to apples comparisons. It's definitely an apples to orange, and we're trying to find the happy path down the middle.
So yeah, like those kind of bring up. There was a rumor a few weeks ago that like Windows was going to rebase on Linux or something, right? But it does make you wonder that like, would that just be easier at this point, right? Like, I don't know. There's such a massive Windows install base. I don't think that'll ever happen. But like the idea of like a consistent standard for like systems metrics reporting, like I feel like that is like needed almost to an extent, I'm
really hoping a project like this helps drive the community to that standard is what I'm looking at here.
Right, like, because there's so many metrics to pull, and everybody cares about golden signals. There's all kinds of things to watch out for in the SRE world, right? Like to keep an eye on, and like getting those consistent, right? Like that's hard. That's very hard in a kind of a multi-OS environment. Even when it is like multiple different versions of Linux, yes, it is still the Linux kernel, and those stats are easy to get, but sometimes there's subtle differences even in the performance of applications between,
cloud vendors,
right? Everything, like all the stuff that applies underneath. Like Linux is just on top of what your hardware is at that point. And if your hardware is virtualized, that makes it even more interesting, right? So yeah, there's various subtleties that you have to look out for everywhere you go, I feel like. And adding the Windows part to the mix makes it even more muddied waters, right? Like, does this thread actually mean like a whole processor is being taken, or does it mean something different, right? Like,
so those are the things that we really hope to identify and work with the customers. I'm really excited to work with the community on this. So please open up issues on GitHub, like give us feedback, point us to improving everything as a whole, as a group. I think we can push the community to find something that's a little more standardized in the process.
Yeah, I would like to see just metrics reporting in general get a little bit more standardized, right? Like Prometheus drove the cloud native world that way. I feel like I almost hope that there's like some industry-wide initiative to kind of make, like when I open Top, I understand what I'm seeing. When I open Windows Systems Monitor, whatever it's called, like I understand what I'm seeing, but they're not one-to-one at all. And then like having to compare the two, right? Like, does this Linux application perform better on our Windows nodes? Who knows, right? Like,
that's where I think we're going to get it.
Pans out, yeah.
As we said, or as you said earlier, right now we're attacking the happy path, but as we diverge from that, I'm really interested to see where some of that stuff goes. So, Arvind, I don't know if you have anything you want to weigh in that you're excited about too.
I think what I'm really excited about is getting VMware vSphere IPI support enabled at this point. That's what I'm really looking forward to. There's a lot of interest from the OpenShift dev community on SIG Windows to get this enabled. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, I think VMware being such a large install base of OpenShift and Red Hat in general, right? Like that next checkbox, I think will be the most fun part. What are the biggest challenges making that leap from the cloud vendors to VMware? Like, what are the kind of gotchas here right now that you're sort of working through that you can talk about?
There were not that many huge gotchas, I would say. We did run into some issues with a bug with VM tools that was already fixed by VMware, but was not present in our VMC cloud environment. So you run into those sort of environmental differences, but from a base level, from an operator level, the amount of differences that the operator has to do when it comes to VMware is very minimal.
Okay.
I think there are just one or two steps that we're doing different.
Interesting.
With VMware. But otherwise, it's pretty much consistent across the base. Of course, the machine set is going to look different for VMware versus AWS versus Azure.
There's also some work that needs to be done on a golden image ahead of time, to where when you're working in the cloud environments such as AWS and Azure that we've facilitated, those images are all prepared and ready for you.
Yeah, they're baked and tested, tried true. Yeah.
In VMware, you're going to need to configure your golden template in essence, and and use that for your cloned images. So we did document out a large part of that and have worked through that with customers, but I'm sure there are customers of Red Hat that know probably way more about this than we even do. So
right. Yeah. Like, I mean, for my Windows days, right? Like the idea of, or not Windows days, but for my operational days, right? Like the idea of a Windows golden image, like scares me a little, right? Because I know how quickly those things can get out of date, right? Like, so having that golden image kind of like, with some strong suggestions around automating the production of that golden image, I feel like is vitally important.
No, using a pipeline to create it is definitely the way to go nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't sit there and update your golden image every 6 months by hand. Please don't. Please don't.
Don't do that.
Yeah, one more thing I would like to point out on the vSphere side is the support for persistent storage. So far, we have in-tree volumes. That's like a supported persistent storage solution in vSphere. But the upstream community is in the process of moving CSI proxy, which is in alpha right now, to GA by Cube 1.20, which should happen by the end of this year.
Yep.
Once they GA the CSI proxy in Cube, we will get support for the CSI proxy support, right, which includes things like snapshotting, provisioning, deprovisioning, and all the goodness that CSI brings should be available once that CSI proxy. That's another I would say goodie we're waiting for from upstream before we can harden the solution up.
And that is a very fascinating point. Like, I'm on the 120 release team, and like, I don't think a lot of people realize like what kind of like magical orb of things has to come together to release something like the Windows machine config operator, right? Like, we're working with our teams internally here at Red Hat. We're working with Microsoft. We've worked with AWS. We're working with upstream. All these people, all these different organizations that have their own priorities and their own kind of like KPIs, for lack of a better term, OKRs and KPIs. We're all kind of moving at speed in our own directions, and we're all kind of hammering on the same pieces of wood, right? Like, we're all working on these things together, and it is a lot to bring together just a Kubernetes release. So I can't even imagine what it's like to like bring together the release of an operator of this type, where you're introducing a whole new operating system into what has predominantly been a Linux dominated world. So yeah, like the enormity and the amount of moving pieces, I sometimes like feel like we gloss over that in these calls, and there's a lot going on in the Kubernetes community as far as enhancements, and there's a ton going on in all the different cloud vendors, VMware. I mean, just the hardware space is just constantly changing, right? Like, so you name it, there's all these things happening all at once, and eventually someone's going to come to us and be like, "Hey, I need Windows GPU node." Right? And we're going to be like, "All right, here you go," because we will have done all this work in the past, and we can kind of glue it together in the future now, right? Like, it's kind of amazing how I feel like that's going to come to light eventually. Someday there will be like this massive GPU instance of Windows boxes doing modeling for something. Who knows? But because it was written for Windows, and it's running on OpenShift now because of all this work you guys are doing. So I'm very, very happy to even think that that's a possibility, right? Let alone, right, like, to be sitting where we are with the ability to add Windows nodes to OCP or OpenShift in general is just amazing to me.
Chris, you're absolutely right about the complexity. It kind of goes back to that earlier statement you had said about the flywheel. And like, we've gotten a lot of the complexity together, and we've started to get the wheel of momentum. But I would beg everybody to remember that this is the beginning of this journey, and that we will be adding lots of things as we go along. This is not an apples to apples comparison at this point. So you will see more and more features coming from us.
And I would imagine it would come at a very rapid clip, right? Like, you're not going to be rested on your laurels, I don't think. No. Awesome. Chat's pretty quiet right now. Any other questions from the audience? Want to give everybody a moment to fire them off before, before I ask if there's any final thoughts or anything, right? Like, I feel like we got everything covered. Thank you both, Arvind and Anand, so much for chiming in. Thank you, Matt, for the not recommended question at this moment. That was kind of nice to never thought about, what shouldn't you do with this tool? It's always good to know. Are there any other links or anything that I need to share with folks? I got the blog post from last week. I got the repo. You did the Tigera thing. Oh, you got a slide for the roadmap. That's right. Yes, let's share that real quick.
Just wanted to point out a couple of things. Let me see if we can go full screen on this. Yes, most of these questions in terms of what platforms you're going to be supporting in the near term and the long term. So obviously vSphere is a big one for us. In the midterm, which is I would say 6 to 9 months, OpenShift for and beyond. We want to have more environments like OpenStack, maybe bare metal and things like that. And as we spoke about, we want to have a more hardened solution for storage, monitoring, logging, and so on and so forth. Support for things like GMSA, right? Again, healthcare industry, GMSA is very critical. They want to authenticate their Windows application with things like Microsoft AD or with Okta or those kind of things, right? We want to get some samples for GMSA. And then in the long term, obviously, we want to support more hosted platforms like ARO, Azure Red Hat OpenShift, Amazon Red Hat OpenShift, OpenShift Dedicated. And then, we really haven't spent much time on the developer journey, right? So far, Gabe and Arvind have, been really doing an awesome job of building a really secure hardened cluster. But at some point, we need to start talking about the developer journey. How are developers making apps? How are they going to connect it to a build pipeline? Is that going to be Tecton or a third party like Octopus CI/CD or Azure DevOps? Whatever it is, right? And how are they going to deliver the app through the supply chain, onto the OpenShift deployment target? So we need to talk through those journeys and what we can do to improve the developer experience for that part of the process. And we spoke about things like Knative and Service Mesh, but again, those are things in the far horizon, good North Stars that we want to shoot towards. But that's going to take a lot of time, by the time we get to Knative and Service Mesh. And again, a lot of that is going to be driven by customer demand. And just want to really point out that this is evolving priorities. And as we launch this to the marketplace, as customers give us feedback, we will be prioritizing based on where the demand is and where customers specifically ask us to go. So that's how we'll be prioritizing the roadmap as we go forward. We get more customer feedback, and it's kind of like this auto-correcting Google search, right? You search Google, and it gives you more efficient search results. So that's how our product roadmap and our journey is going to be built, is with that feedback loop.
Yeah, the feedback loop is vitally important, right? Like if we're going in the right direction, that's great, but we need feedback. And if it is the right direction, but there's little tweaks we can make, let us know. Question, we don't support on Red Hat virtualization. I don't think we do off the top of my head.
That is a good question. We do not support Red Hat virtualization, and I'm sorry if it's not one of those items here, but it is definitely an item on our roadmap because customers have asked us for support on RHV. So that's a very legit ask.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Trying to think what else platform-wise, right? Like, could I run? So here's an off-the-wall question: could I run OpenShift virtualization Windows nodes and use this community operator? Maybe, maybe not. That's a good question. Does it have to be? And like, I guess right now it has to be the happy path is Azure instances, AWS instances, but running them as a VM inside OpenShift is that a happy path yet?
Yeah. So I would call out this slide. So you can run Linux containers. You can run Windows containers. You can run CNV or KubeVirt. All scheduled, managed by the same OCP control plane, right?
Nice.
You can get traffic from one to the other. You can get traffic into the cluster, out of the cluster. So all these three different elements, which is Linux containers, Windows containers, and Windows virtual machines, can be a part of the same cluster. Right?
Beautiful. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. That was just a question that popped in my head. I didn't even think about that before the show came on. But yeah, that's awesome that we're doing that. Let's see. No other questions from chat. Anything else before we part ways here?
Yeah, last but not the least, this is an announcement blog that went out last week. So I would encourage customers to read this, try this, give us more feedback. Again, you can open GitHub issues. So I'm gonna put the link to the blog here.
Thank you.
I wanted to say thanks for having us, Chris.
No, thank y'all for coming on. Right, like I think this is the fastest turnaround between announcing and show we've might have had in a while. So thank y'all for thinking of me and thinking of everybody else that is watching out there. If there's nothing else, y'all, I think we call it here. And yeah, okay, cool. So up next on the show, noon Eastern, 1700 UTC. We have an OpenShift Commons briefing about backing up your clusters with. No, I'm sorry, not backing up your clusters. Introduction to Contour with Steve Sloka and Nick Young from VMware. So yeah, that'll be awesome. And if you have any questions about the Windows Machine Config Operator, feel free to let me know at Chris Short on Twitter and cshort@redhat.com. I can get those questions answered for you. JP Dave, don't worry. I will send you the slide that you asked for, the roadmap slide, and we'll see you next time here on OpenShift TV, everybody. Thank you, Anand, Arvin, and Gabriel, the easiest name to say that I forgot. Thank you for joining me this morning, and y'all have a great day wherever you're at. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, folks.